Hey guys, welcome back to Real Housewives Recaps. Today we're talking Devil Wears Prada. So this is the third part in my recap series of Devil Wears Prada, and this time we are going deep into the fashion of it all. I really want to get into the behind the scenes stuff, talk about the fashion, the makeover, all of it. And and also go through this part of the movie and talk, any kind of juicy info I can find out from behind the scenes and all that good stuff. I really am enjoying recapping this movie. It's a lot of fun, and I can't wait to get to this part. I've been looking forward to this. This is after Andy's had her makeover. Remember, she goes to Nigel in tears, and he gives her a bunch of stuff, and we see her walk into the office all made over, and that's where we pick up this episode. So let's get into it. But first, if you're enjoying this deep dive / recap, consider checking out Patreon. For $5 a month, you get access to my Sex and the City recaps. I've gone over the original series. I'm working my way through all the episodes, trying to dig up any behind-the-scenes information I can find, and just having fun recapping that series, so check that out. Okay, before we get into the breakdown, I really want to talk behind-the-scenes / costuming of it all. So, of course, Patricia Field, who is known for Sex and the City, came over to do the costuming for this movie. So the idea is what the cast wore would be the utmost important because the movie is based on the fashion industry. So she had a budget of $100,000. She relied heavily on people she had worked with before, friends in the industry, to loan her pieces. Ultimately, she ended up spending $1 million. They believe it was about $1 million that was spent making it the most expensively costumed movies in cinema history. The most pricey item in the movie was the $100,000 Fred Leighton necklace on Meryl Streep. So for the character of Andy, Pat Field has gone on to say she felt like she would be more of Chanel, like Chanel girl. And Chanel itself was delighted because they wanted to see Chanel on a young girl to give it another point of view. They had thought before it was previously like mostly middle-aged women in suits, but they wanted to show a more youthful, funky approach. Calvin Klein also played a big role in Andrea's wardrobe. Most of the garments on screen were borrowed. Streep likes to tell an anecdote where she wanted to eat spaghetti at lunch but wasn't able to because she was wearing a very fancy dress, and if it got soiled, then production wouldn't be able to return it. Pat Field has also gone on to say she put Miranda in about 40% in Prada. She knew that the character was originally based on Wintour but didn't want to copy her style, so they looked for other looks that would fit the character but not be exactly like Wintour. Emily Blunt has gone on to say that she and Hathaway would wear the heels all day running around, the heels that they were given. Hathaway had it especially bad because she would have to be running down the street in her heels. And then when Meryl Streep was filmed, if they were filming full body, of course she'd wear the fancy shoes, but if they weren't, then she was generally in Uggs. Stanley Tucci went on to praise Pat Field, saying she sort of just sits there with her cigarette and her hair and would pull stuff, these very weird elements, and put them together in this ensemble, and you'd go, come on, Pat, you can't wear that with that. And she'd say, just try it on. So you'd put it on, and not only did it work, but it works on so many different levels. So just general information. Again, this movie was rated PG-13. Its runtime is 109 minutes. Now, something I haven't discussed before that I found very interesting, their budget was believed to be around $35 million. They actually have this thing where it says between $35 and $41 million is about what they spent on this movie. Box office, $326.7 million, so very successful for them. Okay, so we pick up on the movie where Andy has just been through Nigel's makeover / the big closet and gathered things. So back at the office, Serena and Emily are talking crap about Andy when Andy walks in, and they are just shocked. She doesn't say a word. She comes in looking totally different, wearing this. And let's talk about this. What are your thoughts? I understand the fashion. I mean, it's a little much, right? But it's cute. She looks cute. The idea is here they had her in Chanel. Again, they wanted to do this whole youthful Chanel thing with her. I personally am not a huge fan of the haircut. I think the bangs are a little severe, but she looks great. I mean, what can you say? One thing that they talk about in this movie is Andy becomes more confident. Her eyeliner gets thicker. At the beginning, she's wearing almost none. At this stage, she's wearing a lot more. It's a lot thicker. And then, of course, by the time she goes to Paris, it is eyeliner. Okay, so there's a montage of outfits. The song Vogue by Madonna is playing. We can see that Andy is growing in her confidence. She's getting better at her job. She is able to handle things a lot more like Emily does, like more smoothly, more calmly, less frazzled. Miranda comes in. She's on the phone. You can clearly see she's taking note of what Andy's wearing. And I love that she gave Andy a second look after she sits down, clearly impressed by the effort, even though she would never say such a thing. That's all. Okay, so at dinner, Andy is running late, and she shows up with presents for everybody. Now, this was another great part of the book. In case you haven't heard the other recaps, I love the book. I've read it a couple of times. The movie is very similar. There's a lot of things they got right, but there's details like this that they really go into deep in the book. So the idea is that Miranda Priestly got so many gifts from all these, I mean, you name it, designers, celebrities, things like that would send her incredible gifts. And it wasn't she just wasn't into it. She didn't want to open anything. She didn't want the presents. So Andy and Emily's job was to open her presents, log everything that she got, send them a present. And they basically got to keep a lot of the things that were given to Miranda. So this Bang & Olufsen phone is actually mentioned in the book. Retails at $1,100 or did at the time. She ends up giving it to Lily. She also gives Lily a $1,900 sold out everywhere bag. I think she said it was Marc Jacobs bag. And so, of course, Lily is super excited about that, as I would be too. I'm so jealous. I think it's a really pretty bag from what I could tell here in the picture. So in the middle of this scene, her phone rings, of course, and it's Miranda, and everybody is kind of messing around with her. Her friends are. They're throwing the phone around, and Andy is pissed. She doesn't think it's funny. She calls them all assholes and leaves. So, again, a sign that she's taking the job way more seriously, and she's kind of drinking the Kool-Aid, and they're starting to notice it too. Okay, so she's been called out on an errand. She goes into this loft. She's looking for James Holt. James Holt is actually played by Daniel Sunjata. I hope I'm saying that right. He is from The Dark Knight Rises. So, an interesting thing about him is he was asked to audition for Nigel, but he said he had just come off playing a part like that. So instead, he went for James Holt, the designer. Okay, so she says, hey, I'm picking up for Miranda Priestly. And he's like, oh, you must be the new Emily. So then she ends up meeting Christian Thompson. He's played by Simon Baker from The Mentalist. Okay, so when Simon was auditioning for the role of Christian, he sent in a video. He's actually from Australia. He sent in a video, and he was wearing this very green jacket. And they liked him so much, and they liked his weird sense of style with this green jacket, that they had him wear it in the initial meeting Andy scene. So when he introduces himself as Christian Thompson, she immediately recognizes his name. She's surprised. She says that she reviewed his collection of essays for her college newspaper. He wants to know what she does. She introduces herself as a writer, but then has to explain that she's actually Miranda Priestly's assistant for now. And he says, you'll never survive Miranda. And he says, you seem nice. You're smart. You can't do that job. So he's trying to pay her a compliment, but she takes it very personally, gets pissy, and leaves. So again, this is something that went into more detail in the book. What's happening here, they talk about a lot in the book. It's called the runway turnaround. And what that means is you work at Runway, you hate it, but you can't say that. So you find yourself saying something like, oh, Miranda's difficult. But then you have to turn around really fast, like, oh, but clearly she has to be difficult because she works so hard. It's just a quick thing that everybody does. So she wants to vent to him, but she has to turn around really fast, and she ends up leaving instead of, further agreeing with the things that he's saying, even though he's right, that job is just too much. Back at the office, Emily is being summoned, so of course Miranda uses that name to cover both of them. Andy walks in, call James Holt's office, move the preview up to today. Nigel wants to know if Miranda said why, and Andy, again showing her growth, answers with a very snarky, yes, she explained every detail of her decision making, then we brushed each other's hair and gabbed about American Idol. And Nigel very succinctly says, I see your point. I gotta say, I love the outfit here. I think it's very pretty. I really like the black with the white detail. I think it suits Anne Hathaway a lot, and I personally want this. Okay, so I'd mentioned that Miranda wants to move the preview up. What a preview is where designers show collections to Miranda before they show them to the world, and she lets them know what she thinks in her way. So Nigel explains that 1 nod is good, 2 nods is very good, and only 1 time has there been a smile on record, and it was at Tom Ford. If she doesn't like it, she shakes her head, and if she hates it, well, she purses her lips, and it means catastrophe. So because she pursed her lips, he's going to change the entire collection. So Nigel explains, well, her opinion is the only one that matters. Okay, so during this preview, we see this red dress, which was supposed to be very important to the designer. Of course, Miranda pursed her lips, so he had to change everything. I couldn't help but remember the picture that I love so much of our girl Kim Cattrall posing with Pat Field in a very similar dress, just a much bigger bow. But I love this photo. Okay, so as they are leaving this preview, Miranda is going through her to-do list with Andy. Andy is actually on top of it now. She's getting how things work, and she's thinking 1 step ahead of Miranda. So Miranda decides Andrea is finally worthy of delivering the book to her home that night. So the way that works is Emily gives her the key. She has to hang out in the office till 10 or 10:30, wait for the book to be finished, and then go to Miranda's house, let herself in. She's not supposed to talk to anyone, don't look at anyone, be invisible. There's a specific closet to hang dry cleaning in, and there's a specific table where you put the book. So Emily, of course, threatens her and tells her she has to get it exactly right, so you can imagine how this is going to go. So again, in the actual book, Devil Wears Prada, she goes into detail about this. These twins are kind of sinister. They really try to trick Andy. They tell her, kind of like they do here, about it's okay to come upstairs, even though it's not. Andy's kind of turn around. She ends up overhearing. So in the book, they called Miranda's husband B-Dad. And what that stood for was blind, deaf, and dumb, because they're like, how could somebody be married to her and be able to put up with her? He must be blind, deaf, and dumb. That's what they called him. So, of course, she ends up in the wrong spot. She overhears a fight between Miranda and her husband, and Miranda gives her the death stare. So she doesn't know what to do. She ends up leaving the book right there on the floor, which would probably be a cardinal sin, and she walks away. The next day, she goes into the office, and Andy is grabbed by the arm from Emily. She drags her into the little kitchenette area and is like, I know, I made a mistake. The twins said come upstairs, and Emily's like, you went upstairs? You should have climbed in bed and asked for a bedtime story. And she's so worried about the Paris trip being in jeopardy, Emily is. She's like, if you get fired, it's going to affect my trip. You've got to stop doing stuff like this. Okay, so from here, Miranda calls Andrea into her office as a form of punishment. She decides that Andrea has to get the new Harry Potter book for the twins. So Andrea's like, okay, fine, I'll go to Barnes & Noble. I'll get them each a copy. She's like, did you hit your head? No. She needs the unpublished manuscript of Harry Potter. So she says, we know everyone in publishing. You can do anything, right? So it's clearly a test, a challenge, and that's all. She's dismissed. She also demands that she have a steak brought in right away. Of course, the restaurant isn't open yet, but that doesn't matter to her. So the girls are leaving for a train for their grandmother's house at 4. The book has to be at the office by 3. She also, again, she wants her steak. So we see Andy frantically running around, getting the steak. She again, Miranda's so high-powered. They get to go. She gets to go in the restaurant before it's even open. Grab the steak, box it up, bring it to Miranda. She's calling everybody she knows. She's really striking out on this book. She even calls her boyfriend's like, this is it. I'm going to get fired. She basically says she's quitting. He's kind of excited about it. But just then, she sees a bus that reminds her about Christian, of course, a big-time writer. So she calls him. He calls her back, and he's like, I'm a miracle worker. He knows somebody doing the cover art, so he's able to get a hold of the manuscript. She only has an hour with the book. So she shows up to Miranda's with the steak, which, of course, this is, again, a big thing from the actual book. Miranda would make these weird demands, but they would be very vague. So it would sound like she's having lunch in the office, so they better scramble and get her food. But yet, it would be, no, what is this here for? I'm having lunch with so-and-so today. It was just, again, just all games, all power trips. So things just get thrown away because that's just how it goes. But she does, again, end up with a manuscript, and not only did she get it, she managed to get 2 copies bound and in the twins' hands, so they are on the train with their books. So, yeah, she's able to do this impossible task. So this scene was very interesting because she clearly thought about giving up right here, and we see a decisive moment where she makes up her mind, nope, I'm going to do this. She runs to the St. Regis to grab the book. Again, during this, she has surprised Miranda because Miranda thought this was an impossible task too. Even though she doesn't say it, you can just tell it on her face. Now, what's interesting about this scene is when we flash to the twins who have each a copy of their book, we see a nanny just kind of in the corner of the shot. Well, the nanny, the blonde lady, is Lauren Weisberger, who wrote Devil Wears Prada. So, interesting cameo there. So, the theme from Miranda seems to be all these impossible tasks, all these vague demands, and can they figure it out? And it turns out, well, now Andy can figure it out. So, Miranda seems impressed despite herself. She won't show it on her face or anything. And that's where I'm going to leave this episode. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I love finding out all this behind the scenes stuff. I really do. I love the budget stuff. I love the fashion stuff. Just all of it. Such interesting details. Again, just a fun movie to cover. I really hope you're enjoying it. Let me know everything in the comments. I love the comments. They're so much fun to read. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care and stay healthy. Bye-bye.